Okay, so welcome back to the Diary of CTO. My guest today is Inés Casares, the recently appointed CEO of Wizeline, a global AI native technology company. Inés, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you, Guy. I'm very well. How about yourself?
Good. I am very good. I'm very good. Well, considering England lost in football, yeah, I've just about got over it this morning. So yeah, I'm in better spirits now, thankfully. Um, cool. And it's lovely to have you here with us today. I guess by way of introduction, you've built a very impressive career with more than 2 decades of experience in technology services and consulting. You've helped scale international organizations such as Globant and Cognizant prior to joining Wizeline, where you originally led the company's global services organization and AI strategy before stepping up into the CEO role earlier in the year. So super grateful to have you here and really looking forward to hearing a little bit more about your story. So let's delve in, shall we? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your career journey to date, if you'd be so kind.
Yes, of course. Thank you for the kind introduction. Well, as you mentioned, my name is Inés Casares. I'm Argentinian. I'm 46 years old. I'm the mother of 3 boys and married to my husband. That's me, the most important things about my life. And I had a very beautiful career in technologies, a career that I would not have dreamt of, and that was really full of opportunities for me. I started about 20 years ago in professional services. I have a background in communications and a master's degree in management. So I really don't come from a hardcore technology background, although the learning has been very, very deep throughout that time. And I started in technology about 20 years ago in Buenos Aires, when at the early days of Globant. Initially, my first role was an internet marketing consultant. Internet marketing at that time was about internet globalization of websites and creating marketing campaigns and newsletters, and that was my first glimpse into technology. And then, well, started evolving and moving into harder and harder and more deep technical projects. My career was initially in delivery, and then I moved on to lead business units, portfolios, develop, with more and more P&L responsibility. I stayed at Globant about 10 years, then moved on to a smaller company at that time called SoftVision. SoftVision was a very interesting combination of that was born after a company from Romania and a company from India got together, and there we really had the opportunity to. I had the opportunity to drive the global delivery strategy. We eventually sold that company to Cognizant. At Cognizant, I learned from the scale really at Cognizant. Cognizant is at that time acquired us to be their digital engineering leader, or combining with their digital engineering group. And I spent about 4 or 5 years there. I lived in the US. I was the chief technologist for digital engineering. I also led the development of a global network of studios that took me all around the world, creating a network of studios of digital talent. And then eventually, about 2 years ago, or actually exactly 2 years ago today, I joined Wizeline. Wizeline is a player that I had been watching from the outside emerge and grow and position itself in Latin America, where I come from. And I had the opportunity to join initially, as you said, as a chief services officer. And there was a very good compatibility between the company's culture and mission and portfolio. And I was really, I felt very, very, very challenged and very much at ease. Like, it was a very good combination for me. And I guess that led into this new opportunity of stepping into the CEO role now. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, super interesting to hear more about your journey. And as mentioned, you've obviously worked in some, truly globally recognized brands, and building businesses at real scale. But when you sort of take a moment to reflect and look back over your journey so far, what would you say have been some of the most defining moments that have shaped your leadership journey?
The first thing for me, which is why I fell in love with the industry, was the understanding that this was a global play. as I mentioned, even my first few assignments required me to talk to people from everywhere around the world. And that, of course, before that had been limited to travel or to people you meet, but not really on a day-to-day basis. So that just opened this whole new idea for me and made me want to do that, right? And then I realized that at the end of the day, being truly global is just being truly human, because we are all human beings wherever we are, right? So that stayed with me and has been actually a motivation all around. And I really enjoy every time I have the opportunity to learn in depth about a new culture. For example, when I joined Wizeline, before that, I hadn't had a true opportunity of learning about the Mexican culture, and it was, again, a fantastic opportunity. So that was the first one. Then the second time where that maybe defined my leadership style was when things got hard, when I got placed into the harder project, the project that nobody else wanted to manage. So where I certainly didn't have myself all of the abilities required to turn that around, and I necessarily had to put in all of the hard work and the good planning, but also the partnership with the right people that would help us get together. So managing through hard times, things that initially you don't think you can fix, but then you end up fixing, really was also a learning opportunity, because it's not always easy, right? And it takes more or less that, like partnering with the right people, finding, like, working very hard, being very well. That was essentially like my second learning, I guess. And then the third thing, stepping into Wizeline at the time that Wizeline was with a fantastic track record for growth, but in the middle of the AI transformation that required us to build on all of our existing strengths and evolve into an AI services company, also required a lot, and was very defining for me, in the sense that I was given the opportunity to really drive, both from a strategy perspective and from a cultural perspective, and the profound transformation of the company. So those three have really shaped me, and I'm proud of. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. And I think you raised a really nice point there, that when we talk about global scale, ultimately we're talking about people still, right? Everyone's human, no matter where they are, and obviously where they're based. But clearly it's a difficult thing to do, to get a business to a truly multinational kind of global scale. So having worked across multiple countries and cultures so far, what have you learned about building high performing technology teams at a truly global scale?
Yes, that has been a constant in my career, finding those talent pools in different countries and bringing them on. And it was interesting, because having started my career in Latin America, and obviously at that time we built all of our we were very proud of, and I still am very proud of, the Latin American talent. But then you realize that the Eastern European talent is fantastic, and the talent in Vietnam is fantastic, so in a sense you start realizing that there's in those talent markets where there is enough opportunities for learning and a competitive environment, the talent is just exceptional, and we have the opportunity to getting real-time updates. So really, you can find depth and very strong talent in many places in the world. Then you also can find different, according to the business needs, you can find different cost profiles, you can find different time zone overlap with your clients. So all of that is okay and necessary. But what I realized, first, there's a level of everybody approaching the conversation with a level of humility and openness to understand that there's a lot of things that are very good going on elsewhere, right? And that this industry is truly global. But then I think the single most important thing is to understand that we all share, in our case, the culture of professional services. So you could have different cultures in different countries and different ways of working, but there is a standard for professional services that has to do with client centricity, with the way we commit and deliver, with the depth of our solutions that really transcend the individual cultures. So this is what I've always found to be the key to a successful integration, like respecting and celebrating the diversity and the background of each one of those locations, but at the same time, kind of coming together under this common mission of serving the client with a very clear professional services culture. That is what is going to differentiate us.
Yeah, lovely. And I think the pandemic was a very fraught few years for a lot of reasons, but I think it definitely helped accelerate that for very forward-thinking companies, the ability to kind of make multinational cross-boundary businesses, a lot more seamless, and be able to unite them behind one kind of singular mission. So yeah, that's great to hear. And you obviously touched on the point there about diversity, which I think obviously is huge, and a real hot topic, not only in the business world but particularly within the world of tech. And I guess it's absolutely fantastic that you a female leader in technology, you've become a CEO. It's just a super kind of inspirational example and story. But how has that sort of feedback around you being a women in tech appointed into the CEO role, how do you, any sort of feedback around that sort of shaped your perspective on representation and diversity in leadership?
Yes. When I stepped in as CTO for Wizeline, I got a lot of messages from ladies in the company, from women in the company, that they took a time to write a little bit of more of a personal note. And many of them said, this provides me like a close inspiration, and I know that now this is possible. And that made me stop for a minute and realize that, okay, this is big, because in a sense, my career was not hard. Obviously, I put in a lot of hard work, right? And it was not always easy, but I didn't have big obstacles. Starting from the fact that, I had the right experience. My parents had given me the gift of a very good education, including learning other languages. So all of that gave me the basis. And then honestly, throughout my career, there was a lot of hard work and intentionality, and I took it very seriously. But also so many people were so helpful, right? And I have a lot of men and women that throughout the journey made it possible. Obviously, starting from my husband, but also my bosses and colleagues, that even at times where I thought I wasn't going to make it, I don't know, because I had 2 kids under 3 or something, they were just patient and helping me get through it, and always valuing my perspective, etc. So because it hasn't been so hard for me, when I got to this position, I just didn't think it was going to be a big deal. But then this made me reflect that it still is rare, right? And that women still don't have enough models up there to say, yes, I can do that by being true to myself, because the leadership patterns are usually embodied by men, right? And we see the way that men lead, and that's perfectly fine. But sometimes it doesn't resonate with how a woman would lead if she followed her natural instinct. So I got a lot of questions about how do you create your own voice? How do you make sure you don't lose your style, etc.? And then I realized it was a bigger deal than I thought. And I reflect a lot on the survivor bias, which is maybe what was happening to me, because I can tell the story because I survived, because I didn't drop when things got hard, or because somebody helped me when it was needed. But a lot of other women will drop, and then many others that are persistent might not have that vision. So I'm very committed to that topic, especially because now I think that the conditions are there for women to really thrive and succeed. And as I mentioned, and specifically in leadership roles, right? Like there's no reason why a company would not have a woman CEO if she deserves it, and if she has put in the right effort and work. As I mentioned, I don't have daughters. I have sons, but their friends come over, and we talk about the future, and I always encourage them to think beyond what they can see, right? They probably think more of their dads as people in business and less about their moms, but just telling them, like, you can do this, you can do whatever you want. And if your choice is to also be a mother and have your own kids, you will also do it. And to that point, I think girls now have a much better environment to do that, right? There's a common understanding that responsibilities are shared, and that there's times in life where you need some flexibility, and all of that is now looking much better than when I was in my early stages.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I am a dad of two daughters actually, and it's something that I'm very deeply passionate about, and I think it should just be massively celebrated. You know, when we get some great examples of women massively succeeding in the world of business, and it sounds great that you're obviously approaching this from a very kind of refreshing and humble angle, and obviously recognize the sort of help and contribution from other people, but also I think really great to hear that you recognize it is an important thing and it should be drawn attention to, and it should be a great example set to other people out there and get more exposure to women in leadership. Absolutely. So well, I wish you all the very best with the post. It's I'm sure in very safe hands. But let's talk a little bit about Wizeline as a business, because so Wizeline as a company obviously work closely with CTOs and technology leaders to help them navigate the world of AI transformation. So from your perspective, having been with the business for as long as you have now, what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions that organizations have about implementing AI successfully?
Yes, well, I'm very lucky, as you just mentioned, to have exposure to all of these brilliant CTOs that are our clients, that have now in front of them like this opportunity to fully transform the way they do things, and they are kind of making their choices. And it's very interesting to see this happening across different industries, and it's also a very great position to be when we can advise and bring some shared expertise to them. I think there's possibly two misconceptions that are related to each other. One is thinking that this is only a technology problem or a technology issue, and that technology alone is enough. That is the first one. One of our clients, a brilliant CTO, he admitted to me that maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago, he thought this was essentially a technology problem, and he used to kind of discuss very intensively with other CTOs, and then eventually he came down to realize this was a human problem, right? And that's the thing. You have to go through the motion to understand that technology alone is not the solution, and that's why I'm so optimistic about the future of services, because technology alone doesn't get itself placed in a position to provide strategic advantage to clients or to companies. So that is the first one. And the second one is related, is thinking that AI will solve all problems and any problems, and start by the solution and not by understanding what the problem is. And therefore there's this time this POC fatigue, like people have just gone through this cycle of trying all sorts of different things that, if they were not on the first place the right problems to solve, then obviously an AI-powered solution or a solution that heavily leverages AI will not be the right solution. The other misconception, Guy, that I think is part of the infancy of some of these things, is thinking that because the technology is so powerful, the whole environment will adapt to a very powerful technology, and that the things that yes, it is true that certain transactions or efforts that could have taken hours, or not hours, like days or months, can take literally hours or days, right? That is true at a task level or effort level. What doesn't happen from one day to the other is the transformation in the internal mindset, workflows, processes, ways of working, culture, to make that happen for a company in an impactful manner. So this idea that now, because the technology is so powerful, everybody will just let go of their concerns, and the dependencies will no longer exist, and the path will be paved for technology to come in and deploy itself and make it work is really not proving to be true, right? And that's why, again, the good old framework of professional services, of deep transformation, the good advisors are so important at this time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's one sort of thing that you pulled on that I'd like to draw attention back to there, which is, that the CTO you were talking about felt that AI was a technology problem, but then actually realized it was much more of a human challenge. So what I agree with you, but just sort of break down for us a little bit more. What do you mean by that, and why do you think maybe a lot of other organizations are sort of making that initial pitfall?
Yeah. I think a lot of organizations are underestimating what it takes to transform the mindset and the ways of working of their talented teams with AI. And we've seen this again and again, where there's a first step that is adopting the technology. Obviously starts with learning, then goes on to experimenting, but then to wanting to do this and wanting to really evolve this way. The good thing is that this is there's very quick evidence that things are not working when adoption is not working. So I haven't seen a lot of people that persist too long in the error of thinking that this will just get done, because immediately you realize it takes longer, right? And I'm talking about the teams that the organizations that are going through the process of enabling their very valuable and domain savvy and high performing teams with a new technology, right? They are going through the process of taking their teams along, right? Because there also might be organizations that are moving on from their teams, right? Which is a different posture. But I think the real value is in understanding that your teams that have got the domain expertise, that understand your business profoundly and your sources of competitive advantage, gets equipped, adopts AI as a way of working, for example, in the software development lifecycle, and then starts driving more impact. Because then the question is, what do I do if I can do things faster? Then what do I do with that, right? And I think there's a lot of I read a lot of people saying, well, I want it to do the mundane work so that I can focus on strategy and create creativity. And I think I've always been a little bit skeptic about everybody wanting to be very strategic. I think strategy is obviously important, but there's also a lot of hard work, and everybody has to understand the impact that they can make right here, right now. So sometimes the answer is that with AI, I can do more of what I was doing. It's not necessarily that all of my job now is going to be fun and creative. It's just that I can provide more value. Like if my throughput was X, then it's probably going to be 2X, and that's my commitment, right? So that also is happening. So I think, yes, some organizations underestimate it, but the good news is that very soon they realize, and very soon, and now there are more and more, there's more and more awareness around the mindset shift and the enablement that needs to happen and the whole change management.
Yeah, it's fantastic the point you raise, talking about the talent landscape. It's a conversation obviously within the tech recruitment world I have with a great number of companies now about, in this AI world, what does the future of the workforce look like? How do we shape teams now moving forward across different levels of seniority, etc. But bearing in mind what you were saying there about it being used as a tool for productivity versus creativity, I mean, what sort of skills and capabilities do you feel will become even more valuable in this AI era, and which ones maybe slightly less important?
Yeah. Specifically in our field, there's very obvious transformations that have already taken place, right? The engineer is writing less lines of code, and you can think of an engineer more as an architect or editor and an orchestrator. That is already taken place for all of the roles involved in the software development lifecycle. There's also some sort of erosion of roles, right? Where before there was more specialization in the the QA and the engineering and DevOps. Well, now there's more a breadth in the profiles. So I think the bar is going to get higher and higher, right? Which is a good thing for the industry, right? Because if you give people the opportunity, and nowadays access to learning and to some of these certifications are very inexpensive, easy to get. Like it's really out there for everybody to learn if they want. And then the bar is going to get higher. There's a few other interesting things that are going to happen as I see it. There's going to be a flatter structure, a flatter organization. The individual, and this is something that we've been discussing in the industry for 20 years, right? We have to make sure that our most brilliant engineers, those that, whether they have 10, 15, or 20 years of experience, are still hands-on doing stuff, right? There was for some time in the industry this kind of temptation to move to softer, more managerial careers versus technical careers, because that would have given people more opportunities. And throughout my careers, I've battled with this concept, right? I think that your very strong individual contributor with 20 years of experience, that architect, should have the same benefits and access and opportunities as somebody who is managing a 100-people team. So that now is going to be more and more important. There's going to be less kind of middle management and less roles that are about facilitating, like facilitator roles and enabler roles are going to be less and less. And people will be expected at very senior levels to also be very hands-on. So that is one important shift that I think is refreshing. And the other thing that is going to change dramatically is how we think about juniors in the industry, right? And in this industry and in any other industry. My husband is a lawyer, and I see it closely in so many other industries. And I'm sure Guy would love to hear how you think about that because of your field. But this idea of giving your juniors the low-level tasks, the repetitive tasks, the ones that don't require as much, because on the one hand, they are learning and they are helping with that, but also that's the way to learn. Well, now that can be obviously done with AI. Like there's a simple conception of AI as being your junior, right? Which isn't entirely true, but there, I think there's on the one hand this notion that we cannot have an industry without juniors, like we cannot skip that part, like it naturally has to come for the sustainability of the business and of the industry. But at the same time that we have to dramatically rethink what it is to be a junior. A junior engineer, someone who probably came out of school in the last couple of years, first of all, they are going to be fully AI native, much more than us with our 20, 25 years of experience. So they will operate that way, and that gives them an advantage. And I think what we have to do as an industry is really create the frameworks for those juniors to very quickly be performing at a strong mid-level level, right? And that requires changing completely the mindset and also giving them the opportunities to learn the fundamentals while at the same time being very proactive. So all of that, I think, is what's happening. It's the bar has risen. There's access to learning, so people should leverage this opportunity and step up. Hands-on technical careers at the individual contributor level are going to be more and more important. Juniors, we have to rethink how they and we have to really make room for them and accelerate their learning careers. And then the last thing, and I don't want to overextend, but I'm very passionate about this, is the functional expertise, like more understanding the problem you're trying to solve, and a level of domain specialization or horizontal function specialization will also be valued for these engineers that are deployed and acting very quickly and understanding the situation and creating a solution. But also curious to see how you're you think about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all very astute observations, and like I said, no one's got a crystal ball, right? So we don't know, but I definitely agree with a lot of that, and I think the particularly interesting point, certainly from a lot of the conversations that I have with clients in the market, is around that junior element in the market. And I think when LLMs kind of really took a big step forward, there was sort of almost like two types of businesses, really. One that sort of looked at it through the lens of cost cutting, and well, actually we could just go and deploy an agent or an LLM to go and do this, and we don't need to pay somebody 30-40 grand a year as a junior into the business, which okay, I do get. And obviously in this sort of economy, every business is looking to be cost conscious wherever it can, but the other side of the lens, the other company, are those that sort of recognize that we need to continue to invest in the next generation of talent coming through, because quite frankly, otherwise we're going to create this, I always talk about, it's like air gap, in a few years down the line, where we're going to have a real kind of issue within the business from a sustainability perspective. But I think also it's those companies that, to your point, do recognize that because these people are coming out and they've literally lived in an AI native world, they have a lot of value they can add, from day dot. And junior, maybe has a little bit of a derogatory connotation with it sometimes, that somebody's not as effective or as capable. But I'm sure there's lots of juniors out of university that are 20 times more capable of doing lots of things than me. So I think it's just about reinvesting in people with the right attitude more than anything else. And I think the skills part of it, what's going to become more important, I think it's the people that have the kind of maybe a little bit more of an entrepreneurial flair and a little bit more of a get up and go, to kind of just go out there and do something. And I think, to your point about professional services, the one skill that I fundamentally think will never disappear and will always be really valued is somebody that genuinely understands good customer service, and what that means. And I think this next sort of tranche of talent coming into the market, they have access to this incredible layer of logic now and computation and tech that we quite frankly didn't have. So maybe we did need to niche down a little bit more into these kind of verticals. But a lot of the new talent coming through, hopefully, because they've got this logic behind them, it actually now focuses a little bit more on the soft skills and what it is to actually interact with other people, and how to genuinely solve problems with the tools that you have available. And to your point about understanding the nuances of your market even more. So I think it's obviously quite a tumultuous time, particularly in the UK at the moment, for young people looking for work. And I think I'm sure that's sort of echoed globally across lots of different countries. But I am also quite optimistic in many ways, that I think where a lot of these businesses, it's already happened. We've seen quite a few case studies on quite a large scale where a lot of these businesses were cost cutting and just getting rid of people, and actually realizing, hang on a minute, that's not the best way forward. And they're going back and rehiring a lot of those roles, which I'm also quite encouraged by. So yeah, it's a tough time as a junior person entering into the world of work, but I think you can only lead by example, right? And do what you think is the right thing to do as the leader of the business. But yeah, I definitely massively agree with your analysis. Cool. So I mean, I guess when you're approaching, we're talking about customer service and solutions, and if you were advising a CTO today that was trying to kind of bridge that gap between where their organization is currently and really embracing this kind of AI enabled future, where would you tell them to kind of focus their efforts first to kind of get the needle moving and ultimately move to the right place?
Yeah. So the first and very obvious piece of advice is understand if the organization is ready for this evolutionary step. Before you can even think of truly leveraging AI, your data architecture has to be right. You've got to have the right risk framework and a deep understanding of your workflows and how things could work differently. So the first thing is the pre-work, I guess, and many companies today are catching up, right? They cannot fully leverage AI because the data is not at the right place. So that is to start with. Then the second one is, I think some level of experimentation and getting out there and trying to see how things work is necessary in a controlled environment and manner. but not too much, because it cannot be like this kind of suddenly there's 1,000 POCs ungoverned out there. Like there's some level of experimentation, but also some level of guardrails and control and knowledge sharing, etc. But that experimentation is necessary even as a part of the mindset shift and learning journey from people, right? Like from people in all parts of the organization have to start thinking or reimagining how they would do things. Um, so some level of experimentation, but then be very serious about what are the business priorities and the right problems that we're going to fix with this, and take it very seriously. Understand that it's not going to be error free. Like it it can fail very fast. You have to be ready to course correct, to adjust. You have to make all sorts of decisions around tooling. How are we going to measure success? How are we going to measure ROI? So all of that, if it's not done right and set up from the beginning, and even if it is, it could fail. So it is a journey that requires a lot of attention and intention. And then the last thing is obviously focusing on culture. We talked a little bit about this, but creating the space and the opportunity for people to understand that this shift and this new way of working really has to bring more value, right? And for us in professional services, for example, I see a very clear redefinition of value, right? From value being the time spent, or from value being like based on time spent, or a team that is available to do work, from value being 100% outcomes of that work, and not only in terms of output, but also in the ROI of that effort. And while, for instance, at Wizeline, we have a very sustainable journey of trying to demonstrate that value and get as close as possible to demonstrated outcomes, this has to be lived and embodied, and the technology will, this is what the technology will give us, right? The ability to provide more value for our clients. That's why it's so important that our teams have the right mindset and understand that they have to deliver much more value. And when I said earlier that it's less about creativity and strategy, doesn't mean that it doesn't get creative and strategic, but that more important than anything is giving more value.
Yeah.
So that's more or less what I think, and focus on culture, and culture as a very concrete thing. Culture is not a fuzzy concept, that is exactly how things are done at a specific place, and the right values, the right behaviors that are incentivized, the right structures and systems. So that has to be you have to get that right, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a fantastic point you make about culture, that I think it is a very measurable thing, and also quite a predictable thing if you do take the time to genuinely align around a set of values that drive the right behaviors, and the byproduct is the culture is created as a result of that, good, bad, or indifferent. But I do agree that it's not a fuzzy concept, and actually something that you genuinely can mold. Wow, fantastic! Yes, really, really enjoyed the conversation today. I think you've, you shared a huge amount of value when you're talking about that value there, but you really have, and I think the way you look at things is extremely kind of measured and pragmatic, but also optimistic, for the future, which is fantastic. And yeah, I wish you all the very best in your future endeavors as the CEO of Wizeline. As it seems like the company is in very, very safe hands based on this conversation. But I like to draw to a close every episode, if you would indulge me kindly, with the same question, which is, throughout your career, what would you say has been your one favorite piece of advice that you've received that stuck with you for the journey that you would care to pass on to your fellow human?
For sure. Thank you, Guy, for the conversation. Definitely very excited about what comes next for Wizeline, and for the industry in general. The most life-changing piece of advice that I received, and I would love to pass on, is has to do with trusting that you will be able to get it right. And I'll give you more context. When I had ahead of me challenges that I thought were very hard, and maybe I thought that this would create a disbalance, that I would not be able to cope, or that this would have some sort of negative consequence, really trust that you will make the right decisions to bring it back to balance, right? So there's this essential attitude of getting in front of a challenge, believing that in your journey, in your capabilities, in your support structure, and that you'll make things right. And maybe what has stayed with me, and this is very specific, is many times there's not a right decision. It's about making the decision right, and that has stayed with me and I hope that others can also go with this piece of advice.
Yeah, I think a fantastic piece of advice there to pass on, and a great way to draw to a close. Yeah, I totally agree. You know, sometimes it's just make a decision, good, bad, or indifferent, and you will learn from it, right? And I think that's a lovely way to look at things. So fantastic. Well, thank you again for the conversation. Yeah, please do come back in a while and have another conversation with us. We'd love to check in and see how you're getting on. But yeah, wish you all the very best in your future endeavors, and hopefully we'll speak soon.
Thank you, Guy. Would love that. Thank you for this.